the 5 biggest concerns for Venezuelan entrepreneurs. Today, we discuss.
Welcome to Venezuela Insider, the only place in Venezuela for expats, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, investors, travelers, and related internationals. For more information, venezuelainsider.com.
We already know that the Venezuelan economy is special, to say the least, quote unquote, and also that there are a lot of frictions and obstacles, but also a lot of opportunities within the Venezuelan economy. However, today we are going to talk about the 5 biggest concerns for a Venezuelan entrepreneur and businessman. So let's start. The number 1 is the tax burden. And of course, you know the old saying, debt and taxes. And in Venezuela, compared to many countries, especially OECD nations, the tax burden and taxes are not as draconian as most people think. And actually, the tax burden is lower compared to OECD nations and even most of the Latin American nations. We also have to explain, this is something that I explain a lot here on the platform, is that in Venezuela, basically you have your taxes, your typical taxes, but also have the brick and mortar taxes. And those are the most concerning for Venezuelan entrepreneurs and businessmen. Because the issue is that, for instance, the tax statements and the income tax and that kind of thing is not as high compared to most nations all over the world. It's a progressive tax, of course, as long as your profit and your revenue is higher, of course, hence your income tax is going to be high as well. However, with a bunch of exemptions and write-off and contributions and that kind of thing. So, I mean, it can be managed. It's not the biggest concern. The issue with the tax burden, especially the brick and mortar tax burden within the country, is a lot of contributions that you have to make to different institutions, public institutions, I have to say, that goes to education, science and technology, also the pensions, this is kind of new, by the way, and also you have to pay regional taxes, the municipalities, each one has a different tax rate, so the tax bill is different, and of course you have to add the VAT tax. So you have to do some gymnastics in order to calibrate the tax burden on your particular operation. And that's basically a delicate balancing act. It's not draconian, the complete tax rate is not draconian. However, since there are a lot of tiny contributions, that becomes death by 1,000 cuts. And this is something that you have to manage on a very savvy manner in order to have profit on the bottom line on your balance sheet. Is doable. Something that you also have to recognize is the profit margins are actually higher in Venezuela compared to other countries all over the world. However, these particular operational margins are getting a little bit more narrow thanks to this bunch of taxes and contributions. The second thing is the public services, the utilities. It's no secret that in Venezuela, the public services are lackluster, are way better compared to 5-6 years ago. However, still lackluster and still cause some headaches to the individual entrepreneur and businessman. Here's what happens. Because first, they used to be free, and right now you have to pay for some of them. Of course, the rates are very, very, very cheap. I'm talking for businesses and not for people. For people are almost free. However, for businesses and companies, they are higher, still lower for international standards, way lower compared to international standards, but way higher compared to the average individual citizen that pays next to nothing. Still, you have some blackouts every now and then, let's say a couple of times per month, something like that. On the good areas, of course, and on the lackluster areas, it's worse, actually. Well, anyways, the main point is that this particular instability on the public services, gas, electricity, and that kind of thing, that creates operational costs and logistics costs. That, of course, creates frictions, and hence, that increases the prices and hinders a little bit the operation. However, most of the Venezuelan businessmen and entrepreneurs are very resilient and always find a way in order to circle around those particular issues. Number 3 is financing. In Venezuela, financing is pretty much non-existent. However, it has been growing on the past couple of years. We went from pretty much a debt comatose financing market, less than 1% of GDP. And on the past year, actually, the private banks have doubled the financing, credits, loans, and that kind of thing. And we are right now around 1.5% of GDP. Way far, this is over 100% of growth year over year regarding financing. However, we are way far compared to the Latin American average that is around 30% of GDP. So in order for an entrepreneur, a businessman, in order to get financing is next to impossible. The chances are slim to none. And what happens is that when you don't get the financing, you cannot further expand your operations. And when you need capital, you need financing. And when you have access to financing, you get it on a very draconian interest rate that the cost of capital increases a lot and hinders further growth on a sustained level. Number 4 is sales. And regarding sales, is this particular delicate balancing act that every entrepreneur worldwide has. Is between, of course, the number of sales that you require in order to keep your operational costs and also keeping the margins that you don't want to sell too cheap because you reduce your margins and hence you cannot cover your operational costs and the reposition costs. However, if you sell too high, you lose market share. So that's a particular balancing act that each Venezuelan entrepreneur and businessman has to take into account. Number 5 is the size of the company. What happens is, of course, we know, and this is for more consolidated businesses and companies, not just startups, is that, of course, when the Venezuelan economy contracted 80% and right now is growing on a decent rate, continuous rate, still a long way to go. The main point is that the bigger companies have to reduce significantly their size, the number of branches and the number of operations, the number of employees. Of course, the human capital got affected a lot. And right now, just calibrating the ideal size of a large Venezuelan company is very difficult, and this is something that you learn on the go. And number 6, this is the last one, is human capital. In Venezuela, something that is very funny regarding the human capital is that, of course, since we had a crisis in 2017, a lot of unemployment, that, of course, that altered a lot, was a draconian macro situation. However, now the mindset of the average Venezuelan is working as a freelancer, self-employed, that kind of thing, and they are doing better, and actually they are more fulfilled compared to working on an office, and a cubicle, something like that. Very good on that. However, here's what happens. Still, the Venezuelan market is very precarious in order to offer a good amount of good jobs, good paying jobs for Venezuelan standards, of course, has become more difficult. So the incentives are not there for the human capital, because what happens is that the very good human capital is actually expensive here in the country. The salaries are low, are between $200, $300, $400 per month. This is just for low-end, mid-range employees. However, the top talent, the top-tier talent is expensive here in the country. Those are the few ones that they still keep further developing their abilities. We already discussed this, by the way. So in order to hire and attract and retain top talent is expensive for an average Venezuelan company. I mean, it's not expensive for worldwide standards. It's not like a good employee here makes $100,000 per year, something like that. It's not the case. However, they are very well compensated compared to the average employee. I'm talking $1,500, $2,000 per month, something like that. That is expensive. In order to fill, your payroll with a lot of those individuals is gonna be expensive and also hard to recruit and train.
Thank you for watching Venezuela Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. If you want to work with us, VenezuelaInsider.com. Thanks again and have a nice day.